Okay, so let's get started. I see a lot of people are joining, so we'll get started. Um, so my name is Lev Blinder. I'm here with Yair Hinden and Yitzchak Steinberg. We'll introduce everybody. So I founded IL 360 because of there was a real lack of people helping, guiding the process of moving to Israel. And I made Aliyah with my family when I was 4 years old. So I do have the best of both worlds, but don't judge my English. But the real idea is that we focus on making sure our clients feel protected and feel wrapped through the process and of purchasing in Israel. And we primarily work in Carmei Gat and Bet Shemesh markets. Uh, and we have this amazing development that we're coming here to present today. So before we begin, I'd love to introduce Yair Hinden. Yair is a close friend and colleague, and we've been working together on helping people from abroad, people especially from the US, move to Israel and go through the process of making Aliyah and go through the process of purchasing in Carmei Gat and in other parts of Israel as well. And I'd love to ask you to say a few words.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. Yair Hinden. Lev, your English is fantastic. It's actually too good because I was hoping we'd speak more in Hebrew. Okay, so hi, I'm Yair Hinden. I started working with Israel 360 a number of months ago, and I'll get to why specifically, Israel 360 and kind of being involved in this market in this way. I made Aliyah 3.5 years ago and lived with my family in Efrat. We lived in Teaneck. Before that, I was involved in Chinuch and Rabbanos in a bunch of tri-state area schools, really New York, New Jersey schools from Ramaz, MTA, Hafter, and then transitioned into real estate. And now I'm thrilled to be working with Lev, who really has become a great friend and learning a lot about the business from him. So if I could just for a moment, again, I realize people's time is very precious, but I want to just quickly frame the evening with a few the morning with a thought or two, and I'll start with the following story. So
They're still busy with the bagels. Don't confuse
correct.
things, okay?
Quickly, you forget about how amazing Sunday is upon making Aliyah. But just to frame the morning, so I live in Efrat, like I mentioned. We moved into our house. We rented for 2 years and moved into our house Erev Rosh Hashanah before the war broke out a year and a half ago now. And over the winter of that year, we had some leaking, and we began discussions with our neighbors. Our upstairs neighbors live right above us, and it looks like their gina, their garden, was leaking into our house. So we negotiated, and eventually we concluded that there was going to be this guy Johnny, who made Aliyah at a young age, was going to come and address the water issues. And he was supposed to start right after the Chagim this year, meaning a number of months ago. And he was in Miluim, so it got pushed off. And eventually he got out of Miluim and said he was going to begin addressing the water issues. At a certain point, he said he wanted a week after coming out of the army, and he was going to start work on the house, which we were eager to do before the rainy season, before it started to rain, to prevent continued damage in our house. So at the end of that week, I was excited for him to come, and he pushed it off another week. And he called me up and said, "Listen, Yair, I need another week, a mental health week, and then I'll begin." And I was starting to get a little bit nervous that perhaps he was going to push it off, kind of just kicking it down the road, and we weren't going to get started before it started to rain. But I was wrong, and he shows up a week after that at the end of the second week after he got out of Lebanon. And I went up the road, kind of wraps around, so the upstairs neighbor, was also at street level, but at higher part of the hill. And I walked up and started talking to Johnny, and he told me that he needed the extra week because of what he experienced in Lebanon, and that it was really far more dramatic, far more intense than what he had done in Miluim in Gaza, and needed this extra week to kind of pull himself together. And he told me the following story. He was with his group, with his fellow soldiers up in Lebanon. A good friend of his, Yedid Yablak, Zichrono Livracha, went into a house and was shot by terrorists in the house in his head. And Johnny pulled him out of the house and began CPR, and eventually was met up with medics, and they kept him alive for 5 more days. And eventually, tragically, he passed away. And that alone was very powerful and painful and horrible, as Johnny described. And of course, I'm standing here as they're beginning work on this Gina, hearing the story. And he said, what makes it even more powerful is the fact that Johnny's wife was pregnant with their first child, and happens to be, now I'm fast forwarding to right now, tonight, the bris is supposed to be on Tuesday, and I may go to that bris. But to have this young woman give birth, their first child, husband having been killed shortly before in Lebanon, was just such a painful and powerful story. And I say this story because I think what it did to me is highlight the incredible juxtaposition that exists here in Israel, more so over the war, but I think always is here, which is I'm standing with this contractor ready to talk about water issues, the most mundane, basic, annoying thing that you could deal with, and hearing the story of just shocking heroism and incredible drama, as we're standing there in my neighbor's garden. And the juxtaposition, the fusion of the mundane and the intensely spiritual, meaningful, deep, and rich realities that exist here all the time was very much at play. And I think that duality, coming as an Oleh, dealing with the mundane, dealing with the technical, but also feeling like in the background, everything is being infused with these deeper values and idealism, was very much real. And if I could just throw an idea of Torah, and I'll turn it over to Lev in just one moment, but the Abarbanel asked on last week's Parsha, why, and closer to people in America having read this Parsha, why does Yosef need 2 dreams at the beginning of the Parsha? Why wheat and stars? Just have 1 dream. So the Abarbanel points out that it's highlighting the 2 roles that Yosef is going to play in his family's life. He's going to be involved in the spiritual dimension, the Kochavim, and that's Yosef's responsibility, to set up Batei Medrash and help his family when they move down to Mitzrayim religiously, spiritually. But also he has a physical role, a technical, more mundane, you might say, role, which is to provide for the sustenance and the physical well-being of the family. And that's the dream of the wheat. And so what? Why are both important? Because the 2 exist in incredible fusion in Israel. And that has really been, if I talk about the most powerful message of my 3.5 years here, it's the fact that the mundane, the regular, the dealing with water issues on our Gina is linked in intense ways to the powerful themes and ideas that go on in Israel. And there have been so many moments. I'll just highlight, getting closer to our issue, but when we bought our house in Israel, I'm sitting in Mizrahi Tfachot. My Hebrew is pretty good for someone from Efrat, but it's far, far from fluent. And I'm sitting across this woman getting ready to buy her house, and there is a stack of 500 pages that we had to sign, page 30 and 90 and 150 and 400. And as part of the protocol in the bank, she says to me, Adoni, would you like to read through all of this? Like, she has to offer it knowing that I'm going to say no. But as a joke, I said in a very serious face, yes, I would like to read through the entire document. And her face just turned white, like it's going to take a month and a half to read through these documents. And I told her I was joking. But at that moment, I paused and I said, this is incredible. Could my grandparents, could anybody have imagined that there'd be a 500-page technical document in Hebrew that's just unimaginable 2 generations ago, 3 generations ago? And here I am sitting there and involved in a very technical transaction, but at the same time thinking about how awesome it is that Hebrew, that as the Hebrew is a language, I finished Opan, I guess sometime before, but was thinking about that. And I'll just end with one more anecdote, and then I'll turn it over to Lev. But we just started saying, and there has been some rain, Baruch Hashem, but said an additional tefillah for Geshem in Shema Kolenu, in Shmona Esrei. And I'm in Shul, I'm a Gabbai of our Shul in Efrat, and we announced we're going to start saying, based on the guidance of the Rabbanut HaRashi, we're going to start saying Tefillah Geshem. And fine, we're davening for Geshem. And as I'm davening, I'm thinking, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is having these, guiding us in these incredible successes on the one hand, and we feel like, thank God, the tragedy of October 7th has unfolded in ways where we're starting to see great successes on the one hand. On the other hand, we don't have rain. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has not brought rain, and kind of struggling with that. And as I come home, I turn my water back on to our gina to make sure that there is water so that even though we're in the rainy season, we'll still have water. And again, another moment of the link of just mundane watering your lawn, but also feeling like this is part of a broader story of our davening for Geshem, being in Israel, what we want out of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And those two things play very much together. So as we're about to begin a mundane, quote unquote, experience of talking about interest rates and percentages of money that you have to put down on your house, I cannot underscore how, yes, it is mundane and it's not always so exciting, but very quickly when you make aliyah and begin the process, and hopefully you've even felt different moments of it, so much of what we do, the wheat, the chomer, the technical is infused with deep spirituality and deep meaning as you begin your journey, for Aliyah. So I want to give everybody a blessing that even though you're going to be talking about all the stuff we talk about tonight, Israel 360 will do everything in its power, as I've seen Lev interact with many people, to decrease the obsession with details and make it as easy and smooth as possible. And please God, the idealism that has brought you here and the commitment to living in Israel will still be able to be a guiding theme even while you move through this process. So we're here to help you. Leif certainly is a seasoned professional and has a team of professionals, and we'll do everything he can. And I will help as much as I can to make this process, one that doesn't distract from all the wonderful themes that you were thinking about. So I will turn it over to Leif and maybe jump back in later on in the session.
Thank you so much, Yair. So Yair is definitely one of the best additions to our team in the recent year. He definitely has of the vast knowledge of someone who really knows his stuff of making aliyah and also the nitty-gritty of the Israeli real estate market. So we really appreciate you, and the American real estate market, by the way, as well. So we'll start talking about the topic that we all convened here to talk about today. So what makes Carmei Gat special? So these are the five, in my opinion, the 5 points that are important to find in every place that you'll buy in Israel, but Carmei Gat definitely could highlight each one of these points. So, and we're going to try to speak about all of them. So we're going to speak about location and employment opportunities. We'll speak about the community, the neighborhood, and the affordable housing. So we'll get to each one of these. But let's zoom out and see where Kiryat Gat or Carmei Gat is. So Carmei Gat is a neighborhood of Kiryat Gat, which is right down here. You see Tel Aviv, Modi'in, Jerusalem, Bet Shemesh, Route 6. Route 6 is a very important road that crosses Israel from north to south, and it's literally right next to the neighborhood. And there's also a train line that goes directly from Kiryat Gat to Tel Aviv, and soon they're also going to build one from Carmei Gat. We'll show you in the next slide as well. We're also not far from the beach. And yeah, so if you zoom into Kiryat Gat, this is the whole area of Kiryat Gat. So this underneath Route 35 is the older city of Kiryat Gat here on the right. So, and up here is Carmei Gat. So right above Route 35 is the new neighborhood of Carmei Gat. This is where the current train station is. And the new train station is going to be further, it's going to be much closer to Carmei Gat. The development we're speaking about is right over here. And it's going to be about a 7-minute walk away. They already started the digging process, and they were already supposed to start full force before the war, but the war really pushed things off. But I was there the other day, and they actually had some workers and some machinery there. Down here is Intel, and there's much more than Intel. I just showed, it doesn't really fit here on the map, but basically from this point and down, there is like a whole long streak of different industrial companies and industrial area. And there are a bunch of different high-tech companies. There are companies like Meptagon and steel factories, and Intel has like a whole city here. And there are a bunch of other companies as well. So for employment opportunities, if people, it's really ideal, because if you drive to work, you go through Route 6. If you take the train to central Israel, it's very easy. You take the train, and soon it'll even be easier. or if people have different professions that could work in different companies like Intel or steel factories or any other factories that exist here, there are a lot of different opportunities. Another very cool thing, Carmei Gat is a brand new neighborhood. I have to say that for a brand new neighborhood, it's very advanced. It's about 95% there. I used to say 90% there, but they just opened up a very cool mall right across the street from the development. I was there the other day. It's very, very cool, very nice. I was very impressed. Hopefully in the next webinar we'll have like some sort of video and some sort of something showing them all off, and maybe I'll also send it out if I could manage to do it in the next day or two in the follow-ups. But in any case, it's a very, very besides, so Carmei Gat is almost there in terms of one of these new neighborhoods, like fits with the landscaping and the stores and the shopping and the doctor's offices, and we'll talk about that soon. But it's also connected to the city of Kiryat Gat. Kiryat Gat is a city that's been around for decades, and you literally have a courthouse and you have Misrad Pnim and different offices. Now, sadly, because there are a nice amount of Anglos that are in Carmei Gat already, there are about over 250, around 300 families that are already in Carmei Gat and hundreds more coming. But the offices are not really geared up for the Anglos, but they do try their best and it's getting better. But all these offices do exist in the area. Like there are a lot of new areas that don't have access to these offices, and they have to go to neighboring cities. So that's a very cool thing. But if this is a zoom in into the
Can I just jump
actual
in for 1
neighborhood.
second, Leif? Just one quick comment. I
Yeah.
just, as an Oleh, I don't want to dissuade anybody from coming to Efrat. If you're a good person, we'd love to have you. However, something I didn't think about at all when making Aliyah was about transportation and transportation to various places. Efrat is amazing, but to get from Efrat to Tel Aviv, even Efrat to Beit Shemesh, is not so simple. And even though people come to Israel and I have a job in Yerushalayim, so it's a 25-minute drive, a 30-minute drive, an hour, if there's bad traffic, but people change careers, people move to different places, and I've seen, not every day, but not uncommon for someone to begin working in Yerushalayim, wonderful, but then they move to Tel Aviv and the commute becomes very, very challenging. I think what has just blown me away about Carmei Gat is that it's new, it's whatever, but the transportation and the transportation to the number of major centers is fantastic, and that's something certainly not to be underestimated. Just to jump in and say that.
Right, there is a train to Tel Aviv that's 38 minutes, and then they also have buses every probably twice or 3 times an hour to Jerusalem that take about an hour, sometimes even less, depends on traffic. It's very, very efficient. And in terms of the place, it's really gorgeously done. I recommend anyone that comes to Israel to come and see. We have an office here and we'll be happy to host you for some coffee. But the place is gorgeous. It's flat. So a lot of people like calling it the New Modin because the demographic of the population is very mixed demographic. So it's like a classic Israeli city with a nice chunk of Americans there. And that's very similar to Modin, but I always like saying it's much better than Modin because Modin is all hilly. This is all flat. It has a gorgeous park. It has a mall. It has a bunch of it has right over here in this half a circle, there is a whole outdoor mall. And then here there is an indoor and outdoor mall as well. It's a very, very cool place. And it's really self-sufficient and very nice. Our development is right here in the center, okay, in this box. So if you see these 2 traffic circles, we're going to get back to that in a second. But before that, I'd like to show you the park that's down here. So this is real footage that we took. This is actually relatively old footage because all this is all green now, and the mall, this is the mall over here that's done already. But you could definitely see how cool this place is. This has a running track, soccer field, 2 tennis courts, a bunch of mini basketball and soccer courts over here, 2 beach volleyball courts with actual sand. They import the sand every half a year. There is obviously a park for kids over here, another park for kids back there, another park for kids over here, indoor outdoor rock climbing, a ropes course, skate park, basketball courts, and I'm sure I missed some things, but like this is a very, very cool park. And it's only a few minutes away. There is a running path and a bike path that literally goes straight from the development to the park. It's about 5 minutes, not even. If I pause here, this brown area is the development. This is the mall that's already done, inhabited, and you literally go down this block to get here. There's actually a cleaning. This is footage that we took in the morning on purpose. That way the park is relatively empty. But there is literally a cleaning crew. There are working bathrooms, these are things that you can't take for granted in Israel. But 1 second. I don't know what's going on here. 1 second. Here. Okay, so if you remember the two traffic circles that I pointed out before, so this is the square where the development is. So we have 6 buildings and 22 semi-attached homes. The Anglo Community Shul just got this piece of land recently, and I don't know, many of you probably saw that they had a whole campaign going on. They raised about a little under 3 million shekel, I think like 2.7 million shekel, if I'm correct. And they're hopefully building a beautiful building, and they're in an amazing community. Currently, they're right off of this main road, Carmei Gat. They have a caravan, but they're building right over here. So it's right next to our cottages and a minute away from our buildings. These are the buildings. So we have 23-story, two buildings of 23 stories, and then another 4 buildings of 8 stories. These are the semi-attached homes. So to get more information about the semi-attached homes, there are a lot of different things that you could add and play around with. So I recommend we just do it on a one-on-one basis, but I'll just give a quick brief. There are 5 bedrooms in the semi-attached homes. It's 2,200 square feet. This whole area is a double ceiling area. This box right over here, which is like the living room area. There's also a functioning rooftop. There's like a whole porch that you could use. You could also add a pool, and some of the units also come with basements. So these are very cool homes. I'll show you a classic 4-bedroom apartment. So this is a 4-bedroom apartment. It's 1,367 square feet or 127 square meters. You walk in, you have your living room, dining room, kitchen. You have a porch right off of the living room, dining room. And then this is a very cool thing. Before we move on to the bedrooms, there is a storage room that's connected to the apartment. So aside for the 127 meters or 1,367 square feet, you get another 130 square feet. 96 square feet or 9 square meters, which is basically the size of another bedroom, aside for your other 4 bedrooms that's connected to your apartment. And when you continue in the hallway, you have the master bedroom here on the left with an ensuite and a niche for a closet. The apartments in Israel don't come with built-in closets, just to clarify. They come bare, and it's important to know that. We could talk about that a little bit more shortly. This is bedroom number 2. This is the main bathroom with a niche for the laundry. Then bedroom number 3, bedroom number 4, which is also the bomb shelter. And you have a powder room. So there are 2.5 bathrooms and 4 bedrooms, and the living room, dining room, kitchen, porch, and the machsan. You also get a parking spot. And this will run for around starting from $670,000 US. And we also have 3-bedroom apartments starting from $610,000 and 2 bedrooms starting from $560,000. You could pay, it depends on every case and at the time frame, but you pay 10 to 20% upon signing. And the estimated completion date is 4 years. So it's 4 years from, it's 4 years. It depends really on the different units. Some of the taller buildings is 4 years. Some of the lower buildings are a little shorter of a timeline, and the houses are even shorter. They're a little under 3 years. So if we backtrack before we get to Yitzchak, if we backtrack and we speak about the 5 different points that make Carmei Gat a great place to buy. So if we talk about the location with Route 6, the train, the buses, Intel, and the whole industrial area in Carmei Gat, in Kiryat Gat, and all that gives you a great location and great employment opportunities. And if we talk about the community, there's already a thriving Anglo community that's already there, and there is a beautiful community that's called Carmei Gat, and there are a few other communities as well. And the neighborhood is gorgeous, and the housing there is still very affordable compared to other areas like Ra'anana, Modi'in, Jerusalem, Bet Shemesh. It's very affordable. So before I continue, I'd like to just give a quick introduction. Yitzchak is a guy that we've been working together for a number of years now, and he's a very diligent lawyer. He's top of the line here. Aside for just being a regular lawyer, he's done various different types of developments. He's worked on the developers end, he's worked on the buyers end, and he has vast experience in this market. So I'll hand it over before you turn too red, and we'll take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Lev. Thank you, Yair.
I just wanted to add one thing. If anyone has questions throughout the webinar, there's a question box, and we'll try to answer everything at the end.
Okay, so thank you, Lev. Thank you, Yair. Good morning, everyone. I would like to, in this presentation, just to explain briefly about the process in Israel versus the process in the United States. Since I found it in the years that I'm practicing for more than 20 years, I found that it's quite significant for people to understand the differences between Israel and the United States when it comes to purchasing a property, and also knowing all the closing costs and the additional costs, so you'll know exactly what's included, what's not included, and so you know in advance to budget yourself and to minimize the surprise that you'll have in the course of time. So I hope everyone sees my screen. If you don't see my screen, just let me know. So in this presentation, okay. So the first, I would like to highlight the differences between Israel and the United States in terms of where the transaction becomes binding. In the US, whenever somebody even signs a contract, so the contract itself is more of a way to intend or to express the intent to purchase, because nothing actually happened, especially on the buyer side, after the contract had been signed. Money is in escrow. The buyer could actually back out almost at any stage as long as the deposit is refundable. It's not called a hard deposit. And you could back out at almost at any stage. And you have plenty of time to do your due diligence. Money was not transferred to the seller. Money was not exchanged. Money is still in escrow, and actually the deal becomes binding only upon closing, only when you close the deal, only after you did your due diligence, whether it's inspection, title, mortgage, environmental, whatever you want, everything is being done at the end, and therefore nothing really happened when you sign a contract. In Israel, it doesn't work this way. In Israel, once you sign a contract, you're committed. If a buyer wants to back out for some reason, they could find themselves losing their deposit, and in Israel, a deposit is a minimum of 10 or 15%. The deposit could be confiscated. You should know, by the way, that the immediate rule, according to the Israeli law, is enforcement. I was involved in a case many years ago where a client of mine signed on a piece of a napkin at the lobby of the Inbal Hotel on some sort of a paper with an owner of a property in Nachlaot in Jerusalem. And the seller decided to back out for some reason. We managed to get a restraining order from the court in Jerusalem to enforce the contract on the seller, because the wording on this piece of napkin were the right wording. We actually made it to be the right wording, so we managed to enforce the contract. So as a result, since the contract is binding once it was signed, so you have to make sure that, first of all, you do all your due diligence prior to signing the contract. You want to make sure that title is okay before signing the contract. There are no mortgage contingencies on contracts usually. So everything has to be done prior to signing the contract. You want to make sure that you won't have any surprises in terms of taxes, fees, so forth, etc., prior to signing the contract. Also, in Israel, once a contract has been signed, so money will be released. Of course, the seller has to provide you certain guarantees, but the money will be released to the seller. We'll explain later on how it works, but money will be released. So again, since the contract is binding, if you want to back out, you could lose your deposit. Also, depends on the type of deal that you're doing. Most developers today have something similar to the United States, where you have like a 1090 or a 2080, where most of the payment is being deferred to the end. But in other contracts, you would expect to have some payments along the way. And again, this is something that differs Israel from the United States when it comes to real estate transactions. Another thing that you have to know about is that we don't have title insurance in Israel. In the States, you're used to paying separately for title insurance. In Israel, there's no such a thing. According to the Israeli law, the lawyer who represents the buyer is liable for the title. So in case, God forbid, there are any issues with the title, so the lawyer is liable for that. You have to make sure that the lawyer has sufficient insurance coverage for this point as well. As a result of the fact that the deal is binding once it was signed, so fees, taxes are due once the contract has been signed. In the States, for instance, you're used to paying the agent when you close. By us, you pay it already once the contract has been signed. Same happens with purchase tax, which is the heaviest expense. We'll explain about it later on. This is something that usually transfer tax in the US or even in England is being paid at the end. In Israel, you pay it once, actually 60 days after signing the contract, but basically all taxes, all fees, everything is due once the contract has been signed. So, just a second, okay. So we explained that in Israel, the contract is binding once it was signed, and we explained that the money is being released to the seller once the contract has been signed. So what actually protects you and in order to make sure that if the developer decides to back out, or the developer just vaporizes, what happened to your money? How are you protected? So the answer, in short, is that whenever you make a payment in Israel, the money does not go directly to the developer's account. It goes to a closed account monitored by the bank that provides the construction finance to the project. And the money is not being released from this account unless somebody on behalf of the bank, usually it's an appraiser or an engineer, approves the certain milestones of construction have been reached. So then we know that the money is not going to finance the developer's new Porsche or his wife's new jewelry or old jewelry, whatever you want. It goes directly to the project and base heat needs. But this is just the first layer. The second layer, and the most important layer, is that against every payment that you'll be making, you'll be getting a bank guarantee. A bank guarantee is like a bond in the US. In essence, the bank guarantee says that if the developer, God forbid, goes into bankruptcy for whatever reason, the bank that provides the construction finance will back out each and every shekel. And by the way, if you buy a CD or deposit your money with some US bank, the FDIC will give you protection up to $250,000. In Israel, when you buy an apartment and the developer, God forbid, goes into bankruptcy, the bank that provides the construction loan is liable for each and every shekel that you paid, even if you paid millions of dollars. In order to make the payment in this way, in this method, and to get the bank guarantee, the money has to be paid from an Israeli account in Israel with a voucher. You literally get a booklet of voucher, physical vouchers, and this payment is being made from an Israeli bank account in Israel. And this is the only way to make the payment. This is designated in order to minimize any or actually to eliminate any situation where money goes to not the where it has to go. But when you make the payment with a voucher, you make sure that the payment goes only to this closed account with the vouchers, and you'll be getting the bank guarantee. In addition, the law says that except the contract itself and except the bank guarantees, part of the contract, you have to get the technical specifications, what we call the specs, or the mifat techni. The mifat techni specifies each and every item in the apartment itself, specifying the dimensions, the amounts, or the place where everything will be placed in order to create clarity. And we're not in a vague situation anymore where you saw on the marketing materials golden faucets, diamonds in the walls, Picasso next to Van Gogh, and so forth. The specs define exactly what you'll be getting. And also you have 3 types of blueprints showing on various scales the layout of the apartment itself and the dimensions, showing the floor plan, including the adjacent apartments, which are your neighbors, and also the plan for the entire lot, so you'll be able to see the exact allocation of the building on the lot, to see exactly the exposure. Any deviation from those plans is a material breach of the contract. Again, the above was done mainly to create a situation where everything is clear and you're not throwing your money down the drain, but everything is secured and guaranteed, so you know that exactly what's the product you'll be getting. So what is not included in the buying price itself? So the first and the heaviest expense is the purchase tax. The tax in Israel, whenever somebody purchases a real estate asset in Israel, they have to pay a purchase tax. Purchase tax when it comes to apartments in Israel, residential apartments in Israel. So as long as you're not an Israeli first home buyer, and in order to be an Israeli, it means that you have to be a tax resident in Israel. That means that you have to spend in Israel more than 183 years in a consecutive year. So you'll be paying 8%. By the way, there's no discrimination between Israelis and non-Israelis. Whoever is, for instance, an Israeli but owns already one apartment will pay the same tax, the same rate, like a foreigner will be buying. Currently, as long as the purchase price is below 6 million shekels, it's 8%. And on top of this, it's 10%, meaning it's tax brackets. If you buy it for 650, so until 6 and change, you'll be paying 8%. On top of it, you'll be paying 10%. If you're Oleh Chadash, we'll explain later on how it's calculated. The law has been changed last August, and it made a big change in the purchase tax, especially when it comes to Olim. The second expense is the real estate agent's fee. In Israel, both parties pay the agent. The regular fee in Israel is usually the agent charges 2% of the purchase price plus tax. Again, the fee is due once the contract has been signed. Your lawyer, usually lawyers charge anywhere between 0.5% to 1.5% plus the VAT. Very much depends on the scope of the services your lawyer will be providing you. And if the lawyer is experienced and has the knowledge to deal with foreigners, because it's a different type of expectations and different type of services that foreigners require from their lawyers. If you are planning on a mortgage, the mortgage broker fee is due once the mortgage is actually executed. Usually a mortgage broker is charging 1% of the amount you're borrowing from the bank plus VAT. Another heavy expense, which is not necessarily relevant in this specific project, is what we call the CPI, or construction index. 40% of the purchase price is linked to the inflation index. There is a dedicated index for construction supplies and materials. So if you're buying, for instance, an apartment for $1 million, it means that $400,000 will be linked to this index. This index is being published or advertised once a month by the Israeli Bureau of Statistics. It's a governmental agency, and it shows each and every month what was the change in inflation in terms of construction supplies and materials. There are small fees as well for instance, for the developer lawyer. The developer lawyer is in charge, is usually charging, this is what the law says, 6,523 shekels. There will be small fee for connecting the apartment at the end. This is not due at signing. Usually it's being done at the end when you take possession. For the electricity, water, and meters and other connections, usually it's a matter of a few thousands of shekels. And obviously, if you want to make any changes in the layout of the apartment, and those changes are not included in the original plan, the developer will charge you for those changes. Okay, so we mentioned the purchase tax. So you could see here the tax brackets for the Israeli citizens' first home versus the non-Israeli or Israelis who already have second house. Bear in mind that this calculation was made a few months ago when the dollar was 3.84, so currently it's a bit more. Today, for an Israeli, up to roughly $500,000, they won't pay any purchase tax. Above that, until 2.3 million shekels, they will be paying 3.5%. From 2.3 up to 6,055,000, it's 5%. On top of it, 8%, and so forth. For a non-Israeli, up to 6.55, they'll be paying 8%. On top of it, 10%. Now, when it comes to Oleh Chadash, so you could see here, the Oleh Chadash, this is a major change. As long as the purchase price is below $750,000, the Oleh will pay 1/10 of what an Israeli would pay, $1,000, a bit more. If it's a more expensive apartment, if it's $1.7 million, the Oleh Chadash will be paying $15,000. And for an apartment which is above 20 million shekels, this is why we picked the 5.4, it's going to be $361,000. What defines somebody as an Oleh Chadash? So the Oleh Chadash could either buy the apartment within 7 years after they made Aliyah, or within 1 year prior to making Aliyah. Now, if you're buying, this is referring to existing apartment. For an apartment which is still in the process, was not built yet, so the law extends the period of time to be eligible for the tax brackets for Oleh Chadash. And for this, you have to make Aliyah within 3 years from the date you signed the contract. Now, in order to be Oleh Chadash, to file the forms with Nefesh B'Nefesh and to get the Teudat Zehut, it's not sufficient. You actually have to move to Israel in the course of the years, especially before taking possession. If you have to be present in Israel, and to be present in Israel more than 183 days in the year before taking possession, if you manage to do that, you'll be able to save tens of thousands of dollars. Now, since Lev and Yair have plenty of stuff to elaborate about, so I'll finish here. I'll be happy to address any further questions later on.
Okay, thank you, Yitzhak. Wonderful. I'm going to just end with the following idea, and then I'll turn it over to Lev, who will answer questions. This idea that I'm going to share, this final message, I think is on the one hand very familiar, so maybe repetitive, but I think, at least for me, critical to repeat and repeat over the past year and a half. And it's as follows. So I like jogging, and I'll often listen to podcasts as I go jogging in Efrat. And one particular podcast, you may be familiar with it, is one called Call Me Back by Dan Sinor. He's wonderful. And he recently had an episode talking to Yardena Schwartz, who wrote a book called Ghosts of a Holy War, the 1929 massacre in Palestine that ignited the Arab-Israeli conflict. And it's about the Hebron massacre of 1929. And I want to just share a few points she makes, and then kind of a message, again, a familiar one, but I think powerful, that for me emerged from this podcast. So they talked about her book, and she had started writing the book before October 7th. And it was just amazing. Dan Sinor pointed out, the host of this podcast, how many parallels there were, and there are, between the massacre of 1929, the Hebron massacre, and October 7th, on many different levels and in many ways. And it wasn't her intention to draw comparisons. As she just researched this before October 7th, there are many parallels. So just a few details from this discussion from her book. So she points out that in the months before the Hebron massacre, Haj Amin al-Husseini, the Mufti of Yerushalayim, a terrible anti-Semite, someone who partnered with the Nazis during the Holocaust, and his nephew was Yasser Arafat, and really a terrible person for the Jews, had been stoking in the months and years before the Hebron massacre, had been stoking lies about the Jewish people, that they are trying to conquer the Temple Mount and destroy the Alaska Mosque, and they rape women, and just really terrible lies that really fomented a lot of hatred towards the Jews. In the Tisha B'Av before this massacre, in August 24th is when it began in Hebron, was about a week and change earlier, was Tisha B'Av. So 10,000 Jews came at night for kino to the Kotel, and then the following day, a few hundred. And the Mufti, Haj Amin al-Husseini, used that as a pretext to say, okay, now the Jews are beginning to storm the Temple Mount. Look, 10,000 Jews showed up. We need to fight them off. We need to stop them. And that really ignited the flame that led to the massacres. A particularly tragic piece was that a few days before the massacre in Hebron, the Haganah came to the leaders in Hebron and said, we want to protect you. There's a sense that the riots are going to begin. They had already begun, elements in Tzfat and Yerushalayim. It's going to come here to Hebron. Please let us protect you. And the leadership of Hebron said, no, we have such a good relationship with our neighbors. It's not going to happen. Get lost, basically. Don't come here because it's going to send the wrong message, an unnecessary message about the relationship that we have with our neighbors. Don't come here. And tragically, on August 24th, 1929, a week and change after Tisha B'Av, the massacres begun, and really everything that we saw on October 7th, elements of those images were extant and existed during the Hebron massacre. Just the level of barbarism and horror was particularly dramatic during the Hebron massacre, worse than what happened in Tzfat and Yerushalayim, and even worse than some of the massacres and pogroms that had gone on in Europe, which the Jews of Hebron, many of whom came to escape. And when the podcast described, when they talked about what happened in Hebron, it was people with knives and with machetes, and just a really terrible description. And I kept, as I was hearing this, running through my mind how amazing it would be, how powerful if the elite forces of the army, or the Israeli army, was just around with just a few soldiers, could have stopped the massacre with the sophisticated army that we have nowadays. If they were in the homes of the people in Hebron, they could have stopped what had happened with knives and machetes. And here we have such an incredible army. And I was jogging and listening to this, thinking, "Oh my gosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, had we had this army, then what it could have done." And then the podcast went on, and Yardena Schwartz, who had written this book, basically said that in the wake of the massacre, the Haganah totally reimagined itself, and it went from a ragtag group of soldiers, not even soldiers, of militia and people that were trying to defend the Yeshuvim in the Tel Aviv area and Yerushalayim, etc. They said, look what happened. We can't rely on the British. We need to reorganize. And the early stages of the Israeli army, the Haganah and the IDF, and then, of course, all the unique elite elements of the Israeli army came into being as a result of the horrible massacre in Hebron in 1929. And what it showed to me was, as I'm thinking, I wish we had all this force here to just, prevent this massacre with a few sophisticated machinery and artillery, we could have stopped it. That really, out of the horror of the massacre of 1929 came the Haganah in an organized army, and then the IDF, etc. And that we never know where tragedy leads. And over the past year and a half, this theme, I'm sure you've heard it from your show rabbis, and you've read about it and talked about it at Shabbos tables, that the trauma of October 7th was indeed a trauma and should never be dismissed as that, and was horrible and painful. But what it has led to, the impact on the psyche of the Jewish people throughout the world, in Israel, the successes of the Israeli army could never have been imagined, but in retrospect has been incredibly powerful. That out of tragedy, out of trauma, comes incredible heroism and successes, is something that we can't underscore. We saw that in 1929 with the massacre of the Jews in Hebron. Haganah emerged in a totally different way, the Israeli army, and we've seen it over the past year and a half. I don't have to elaborate on details. But what I will say is, as I participate in my first webinar, and I'm so grateful for Lev for bringing me in, I'm just inspired. It is amazing. Every person here is a response to the horrors of October 7th and the inspiration, though, that has emerged from it. And I'll just say that I, Yair Hinden, I'm not a soldier. I didn't do the army. My contributions are minuscule and a joke compared to what people have sacrificed over the past year. But I've been inspired, and Lev hinted to it. I work in real estate in America. I do stuff in Ohio. And as amazing and powerful as Ohio is and doing real estate in Ohio, I felt more and more this is not enough. I need to get involved and use whatever knowledge I have about the American Jewish community that I lived in and the real estate that I do. I want to get involved in more substantial ways in helping people make Aliyah. A neighbor connected me, was a shadchan to Lev, and I haven't looked back. And it's been an opportunity to start to have conversation that I've dreamed about since October, well, in general, but more dramatically since October 7th. How can I help and be involved in Aliyah? I've also applied for Shlav Bet, which is a way for people who have not done the army in a real way to kind of get involved and contribute. So for me personally, it's been an incredible experience living in Israel over the past year and a half. And if you're in this webinar because you were thinking about Aliyah for years and decades before, you are also a response to October 7th. Obviously, your passion and commitment to Israel exists way before, but for me in Israel, for Israelis to see American Jews thinking about Aliyah, involved in Aliyah, is nothing short of inspirational, especially after October 7th. And even if it's not connected to October 7th, that's how it's perceived as a piece of the response to the horrors and the trauma of the war. And especially if you've been inspired by what happened, inspired or moved by what happened October 7th and began your more acute Aliyah journey, like we got to move to Israel, we want to buy something in Israel, we want to buy a place, then certainly that's what that for sure connected. So I'm going to end with the fact that you are an inspiration. Being involved in this webinar is inspirational, and it is our response to what has happened in October 7th and the war. And we look forward, as Lev has said, to guiding you in any way possible in your journey now in buying a house and buying an apartment and getting involved in the land of Israel and on your Aliyah journey in a more specific way. So thank you for your time, for letting me be involved, and I'll turn it over to Lev to take questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, so there are a few questions over here. So first of all, the contact info is over here. Some people asked for contact info, and some people asked about medical facilities. So there are a few mirpaot, all the mirpaot in Israel, all the what are they called in Hebrew, in English? Yeah, health providers. All the health providers exist in Carmei Gat. They have offices in Carmei Gat, and they also have bigger offices in Kiryat Gat. So there are definitely a lot of different types of medical options.
If I could quickly jump in, my cousin married a Teaneck boy. A boy from Teaneck went to medical school in Cyprus and is now living in Carmei Gat. And he works in one of the mirpaot. He works, I think, for Maccabi in Kiryat Gat. And I can certainly put anybody in touch, both in terms of understanding the quality of the healthcare, but also if you're a doctor and want to find opportunities in the area.
Right. In terms of schools helping Olim, so like I said before, there's a very serious presence of Anglos in Carmei Gat. There are about 400 families, I believe, by the end of this, by the middle of this coming year. There are about 280 at least that are already there now. So the presence is growing and growing, and the awareness in the schools is growing. It's not fully there yet. I believe that in the next year or two, it's just going to get better. I know that there are a lot of private tutors that are tutoring kids and helping them out. But at the end of the day, they're a minority in the city, but they're a growing minority. So they're definitely getting more and more help, but it's not fully there yet. So for younger kids, it's definitely much easier than for older kids, but there are also a lot of options for older kids as well. I'd be happy to discuss one-on-one and to try to discuss the specific details. Let's see, what else? So in terms of Let's see what else here. 1 second. Okay, so I think, oh, and someone asked, you mentioned medical providers and doctors. What about hospitals? So they have a plan to build a hospital in Kiryat Gat, but currently the closest hospital is 20 to 25 minutes away in Ashkelon. And it could even be a little bit faster if you're in an ambulance, but that's approximately the closest hospital at the moment. They do have emergency rooms and stuff like that, but not a full hospital. And the weather throughout the year, it's on the hotter side, but it's on the drier, hotter side. So it's like more like a desert heat than a beach heat. So you don't really get so sweaty, but it is definitely on the hotter side. So there are a few other questions, but I'll be happy to answer them privately just because they're personal questions. So we'll be in touch, and we're going to send a follow-up email with more information, with a recording as well for people who did not have the opportunity to attend. And we're here for any questions that you may have. And we're here for one-on-one Zooms. Our office is always open in Carmei Gat, and we're also in the States a lot. So we'll be happy to meet in any one of those forums and speak whenever you'd like. So it was great being here for you guys, and have a great rest of the day. By us, it's already nice and dark for the past few hours, but have a great rest of the day. Enjoy your Sunday.
Yes.
Bye bye. Thank you, Yitzhak and Yair.